Hello and welcome back to the second episode of Flicks Through Time. I'm your host, TW Norwich, and today we are talking about feminist cinema across the ages. Well, about 80 years or so anyway. I've got a very knowledgeable guest. Her name is Kate, and I'm really looking forward to you hearing this. She's got some fantastic insights, as my guests always do. Spoilers ahead. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome back. Today we are talking to Kate about cinema, but more specifically, feminist cinema. We're going to cover quite a few age ranges today, I think is fair to say. But first of all, Kate, welcome to the show.
Why, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Excellent. I thought I'd start with something really dull and academic.
Go for it.
When I hear feminists or feminist film, I kind of don't know what that means in the age of 2025 because you ask different people and it can mean so many different things. Can we please get, just so we have some scope for the episode, what is your definition? Are there essential ingredients?
Oh, okay. Well, let's just get down to the essential ingredients. I would say that a piece of feminist film, the same deal with theatre, music, etc., focus on female characters, looking at female issues, etc., and literally giving them a voice. Okay, because as we know, for millennia, women have been silenced, so it is quite nice to finally put them front and centre. And it's not just with regards to the stories, but if we're going to be really brutal about it, it's also making a lot of money out in Hollywood as well. So female protagonists, female stories, female issues.
All right. Here's a hypothetical for you.
Go for it.
Can you have a film that is a feminist film if you have a male protagonist but female antagonist?
I don't see why not, because, I'm sure in her eyes she's probably the protagonist herself, and depending on the context as well. There's so much, but absolutely, once again, women there telling women's stories is absolutely essential. And
I guess if they've got, as you say, voice, but also I think of agency.
Absolutely.
Voice, that's part of it, I suppose.
There's no doubt about that. And look, it doesn't always work out brilliantly, as we're going to discuss with some of the films that we look at today. Definitely, I guess, if we look at from the 1940s to the present, feminist films have changed tremendously, and obviously to reflect the zeitgeist in which they were made in.
Yeah, and that's, of course, always the focus of the show, is taking broad brushstrokes, looking at different eras. And on that note, let's have a look at our first film. We have to jump back just a few years, just a couple years before we were born.
Okay.
1940, Howard Hawks directed a film that I understand there were a couple of different versions I even heard, because it was originally a stage play, but the film we're looking at is His Girl Friday. Not the original title from the stage play, but starring Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell. And I first came across this when I was looking at a documentary on American comedy.
Okay.
And it went across different eras and different styles and so on. And as soon as I saw this, I enjoyed Cary Grant and a few other films, but I think it was described as something like a film that must have had a mountain of a script. There's so much. It's not just that there's a lot, it's well written.
Absolutely. And with regards to the delivery, apparently the director wanted this to be the fastest ever delivered dialogue. And these actors, if they ever fell out of work in Hollywood, definitely would have a gig as racing commentators.
It's phenomenal. And I know there was a bit of improv as well. So obviously they were in tune with what was going on, but it really is their performances that need to be seen to be believed. But it reminds me of films of the time, 40s especially, not just 40s, but the fast talking, the men in the suits, and there's usually a sweaty office, and then some broad walks in with their problems and rah, 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 rah.
Oh, not some broad, anything but some broad.
I know. Yet somehow this film seems to do so much more. If we look at it through the feminist lens, does it qualify? That's the first question.
Well, okay, so obviously Mrs. Johnson, Hildy, I believe is her name, she's obviously front and center and is controlling a lot of the action and is essential to the plot. There's no doubt about that. However, it's fascinating because even though she's this amazing journalist and she's super duper smart and capable, independent and whatnot, still needs a man.
Yeah, that's where it. I mean, context, right? 1940s.
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, remember, women were only in the US starting, were allowed to wear pants and things like that, just before I believe they're going into the war. So, yeah, I'm very aware of the time.
Yeah.
But even so, I was quite surprised by the ending that she's like, oh, well, look, I'm just going to not marry him. I'm going to remarry you kind of thing.
Yeah, so let's talk plot for a moment for anyone who hasn't seen it. It's basically you got a divorced couple at the start of the film, and they both work in, shall we just say, the newspaper game, I suppose. Yep. We get the sense there's a lot of history between them. They obviously have similar mindsets, and it feels like he was very work focused. Well, they're both very work focused, but it got to a point where she said, that's enough, this doesn't feel like a marriage. That's all backstory. It starts with her turning up, wanting to get a check, I think. Was that right? I'm trying to remember now.
Oh, no, she was telling him, I'm engaged, I'm getting married tomorrow, and
that's what it is.
He does everything he can to foil that.
Yes, so he's obviously jealous, and probably one gets the sense that a minute before she walked in, he probably wasn't even thinking about it. He was thinking about whatever the next scoop was. But now suddenly that jealous ex thing, and then the whole thing is this big, huge, here's the news story. You have to get this story or you're not a newspaper man. But then here's his ex. So, can I convince her to get involved? And she's saying, no, I'm going off to marry this new bloke. And, of course, her desire to be good at her job, which I guess that's probably the progressive part. That's where she's saying, no, this... Even though she's kind of tricked into it, she really wants to. She takes her job seriously.
She's so good at it
she's
well.
Exceptional. She rings around all the other blokes.
Which is, I guess, another classic example of, can you have it all? I mean, if we jump forward to the early 2020s, I guess, or a little bit before then with La La Land, the whole point of that narrative is you can't have it all, okay? You can either have your career or, the happily ever after sort of number. So, yeah, that is a quite fascinating idea, but the banter between them is outstanding. It is a fantastic drive. You can see that they really love the game. I don't know if they love each other.
I know. And that's why I'm so conflicted about the ending. And this relates to another film I want to mention shortly too. It feels like if you were to write it today, you would do a lot the same, and there'd be just a couple tweaks there because it feels like she relapses.
Absolutely. Because of his charms, and he's just so amazing, and I can't do it without you. I can't believe you nearly let me run off with this other man.
It felt very 1940 Hollywood.
Absolutely. And, once again, what are we up to here? First wave of feminism has happened. The second one is still coming in the 60s. So it's important to provide context, even though in the 40s women were a massive part of the war movement, war effort, etc. Indispensable, and we see fantastic things. What's interesting, though, is that she's a strong, independent, smart woman, but all of a sudden, right at the end, she almost falls into his arms, and it just doesn't seem quite real. It's too much of a character change.
Yes.
And she hasn't really been surrounded by other women at all in this film. In fact,
very male-dominated.
In fact, I think it fails is it the Bechdel test?
I think that's about having two women talk, is that?
Oh, look. The bar is low, so low you cannot limbo under it, so low you will trip over it, okay? So, the rules are with the Bechdel test is that there must be two female characters that talk to each other, not about men. And I had that in the back of my mind whilst I was watching this, and I think it's failed the test.
Which is funny because and just to be clear, passing that test doesn't mean you have a feminist film. It just means you pass the bare minimum of some representation.
Well, exactly. That's the key thing is representation. Women are 52% of the world's population, and we know that they get minimum lines, they're treated completely differently, etc.
Yeah, but I mean, in the context of the time, this was a male-dominated workforce that
Yes.
in the paper game. So it makes sense in a way. It wouldn't be that hard to put other characters in.
Oh,
But
absolutely. And if you notice at the beginning when she's walking through, she's super duper popular with all the girls and the guys, etc.
Yep.
The mother-in-law, I think, is the other one, the other main character, and Molly somebody, who is the criminal's girlfriend or stand-in girlfriend for a bit. But it is very light on the ground.
Yeah, and the fact that she's so prominent, therefore, she really does stand out.
Oh, absolutely.
But it does feel like a bit of a Hollywood ending where they go, you got to get the two back together because they're the two main people and we want to see them. So in fairness to the film, that lines up with probably audience expectations at the time and probably has some good progressive steps and wouldn't stand up today, I think, as a feminist film.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not in the sense that, we're on what, fourth wave of feminism here, and, we're post-Me Too movement and all the rest, all that continues. There's so much to kind of, I guess, digest from the last 80 years, etc.
Yeah.
And today, if you played that in the class, I think kids would be going, I don't know about that.
Yeah, some of it wouldn't quite play to a younger audience.
That's true.
I just want to mention briefly, before we move to the modern era, a film called Dishonored Lady in 1947.
Yes.
Have you heard of an actor? Her name is Hedy Lamarr.
I love Hedy Lamarr. She's one of my heroes. Okay, sorry, I'm going to nerd out here a little bit. She was an absolute glamour goddess, okay, but she also was a science brain as well and helped invent things for the war effort. She's absolutely amazing. In fact, she's an inspiration for one of our characters of the children's book series that we're currently writing.
Oh.
So, yeah, she's a woman of STEM and of Hollywood.
I must admit, I only knew the Hollywood side.
Oh,
so
really?
That's
No.
how ignorant I was.
Amazing. Like, she patented stuff that ended up being used by the military and all the rest. A phenomenal woman.
Well, this is why I get guests on, filling in my massive gaps of knowledge.
No, this is just why you want me on your trivia team.
True.
Yeah.
I'll keep that in mind.
Excellent.
I just want to mention briefly, because I know the other films are going to have a bit of focus. This film, I guess, is a bit of a juxtaposition. It's somewhat the contemporary of His Girl Friday, and we have a strong, confident lead female, businesswoman, in charge in 47, which was probably not that common in film, I would suggest, because it wasn't that common in reality, of course.
Absolutely.
But there's a problem.
Uh-oh.
She has multiple romantic partners.
What a scandal.
I know.
Oh, my, did she show some ankle as well?
To be honest, I wasn't looking for the ankle.
Well, your loss.
I know. But not simultaneously, I should say, just to be clear. She according to the people who are, let's say, talking about her around her,
yes,
she, that she's moved on to another one. Oh, she's got another boyfriend and all this sort of stuff. And then the next, let's say, 45 minutes to an hour of this film is her being sort of chipped away and judged.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness, what a surprise.
I know.
I wonder if that was Cary Grant or Jimmy Stewart, if that would have the same kind of impact. I would suggest not.
No, and in fact, one of the main plot points is that she starts a new life because the scandals become too much. She meets a bloke, falls in love in about half of a scene because it's 1940s and there's only 90 minutes. We've got to get this thing done.
Absolutely, we're not mucking around.
So we're in love, great. He doesn't know my past, I'll keep it secret, that's fine. But then, of course, it all comes out. The big reveal. And she's now, she inadvertently is at the location of a murder and she doesn't know that she's left. The murder takes place seconds later. And now she's on trial. But because this new fiance, because they really weren't mucking around, this new fiance is so shocked at these revelations that he basically takes a step back and she's so broken, that she won't defend herself in court. So she's going to go to jail for murder because a man won't love her because of her past, right? But I know your head's about to explode. There's one more.
Go on.
I know. There's one more.
You hurt me.
When he gets over it and says, to hell with it, I love you anyway, which on the one hand is a nice moment where we say, actually, this stuff doesn't matter. And he says, no, of course I can still love you.
But the fact that she's going to prison for a murder she didn't commit because all of a sudden...
I know.
Yeah.
I know. But...
angry eyebrow emoji.
I know. But then the very ending, which I thought, oh, hang on, is this a recovery here? Getting out of the nosedive. She says, great, she escapes prison, fantastic. Oh, sorry, she doesn't go to jail. I don't mean literally.
Wow,
she
this is an amazing film for 90 minutes.
No, sorry. She avoids going to prison.
Okay, all right.
And then he says, great, we can be together. And she says, no, I need to go off by myself and find my place because this has all been messed up. And I thought, that's interesting. But then, as she's going to the airport, he does the dramatic run-up and says, stay with me anyway. And then they turn around and hug, cut to credits. And that last piece was a late addition from the studio that was not part of the script. They didn't want it there. They wanted the point to be that she makes a decision for herself in the end that is actually quite smart and all the rest of it. And anyway,
maybe for Hollywood and society of the time, that would have been too scary. Oh my goodness, women taking time to stop and reflect and grow and look after themselves.
I know. So the film itself is very well made. The acting's fantastic. It's all great.
Oh, but can I just say,
as a feminist film,
I know. Well, it seems like it's got definitely some feminist ideals there in the sense of female character going and challenging social expectations of what was expected of women, pointing out the double standard. Yeah, absolutely. But speaking of awesome performances, I think it's important to stop and take note and obviously applaud the very incredible actors that we have out there today, but to look back at the Hedy Lamars, to look back at the Rosalind Russells and the Katharine Hepburns. I mean, some of that work still really stands up today. And some of the nonsense they had to put up with. Apparently, Katharine Hepburn, as you know, big trouser wearer, I'm a fan. She had her trousers stolen when she was getting changed somewhere, and so she just had to wait on set in her underwear, reading a newspaper until they were returned.
Okay, that shouldn't surprise me, but here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, as she said, no, I've kind of lived a man's life. I've done this on my own terms and all the rest.
Ooh,
I know.
Nice.
Right? So, look, don't quote me word for word for that, but yeah, her work is amazing.
Yeah, undeniably. I mean, they carved paths for those who followed. There's no doubt about it.
100%. There's no doubt about that, and it's important that we recognise that work and continue to build on it.
Absolutely. With that in mind, let's jump ahead to 2019. This is a film that I threw at you and said, "Here, watch this."
For the record, can we just have a small trigger warning, or don't be eating certain things whilst you're watching these films?
That's a great point. So the film is called Fanny Lie Delivered. It's set in the 1650s. We're talking Puritan Christian existence, and it's by Australian standards rated MA for, among other things, violence. I wouldn't say as a horror fan, as a big horror fan, low body count, but definitely high impact.
Yes.
Because it does play out like a horror film.
Yeah. It was more upsetting than I thought it was going to be.
Yes, I'm slightly sorry.
I had to shield my dog's eyes. I'm like, honey, you don't need to see this, all right?
Yeah.
But yeah, a really interesting choice. So before we continue, in the words of the Backstreet Boys, tell me why did you choose this one for us to kind of have a look at?
Well, I wanted something modern, something made relatively recently, something that I thought would qualify as a feminist picture, but something definitely not in the mainstream. And the idea that to call it a horror film is not quite telling the whole story, but I've seen very few films with this setting. There's fewer in the context of very modern, the last 5 or 10 years.
What do you mean? The Puritans, fascinating, rocking those hats.
Yes. Now that the hats, the wardrobe definitely needs mention, but to see a film like this, to be focused on how this impacts this female character, I've just never seen anything like it. And I really wanted to hear, looking at this through the feminist lens, how on earth, there's a lot to say, so maybe just talk quickly for a second. Basically, we have a relatively young woman married to an older husband, played by
Charles Dance,
who is just amazing.
All of them are outstanding.
That's something we need to mention. The performances are amazing. Charles Dance is, I've never seen him do a bad performance, but this is just fantastic. And he's got very much the follow the book, the good book, we must repent, church on Sundays, punishment, guilt, all that.
Yeah.
Definitely man's in charge, that sort of stuff.
Patriarchy galore, yeah.
Yes, he's got a son. If his wife gets angry at the boy, hey, don't do that, leave the boy alone, sort of thing. He says, I think this is an exact quote, he says, don't let a woman push you around.
Yes.
And this is a 10-year-old, or roughly 10, something like that. So that's our setup. And very early on, a young couple arrive naked and seeking help.
Yes.
They hide in the house of this family, and they tell a story which I guess we never hear the definitive truth, but we get the sense there's some truth to the idea that it was highway robbery, but not quite, but we'll get to that. And effectively they're hiding out, and eventually when the authorities catch up with this couple, then this family, Fanny's family, are held captive, more or less.
Basically.
Hostage. So that's where the horror element, it's very creepy. It's a small cast.
Yes.
They go off to town and make references, but we never see them go anywhere.
In fact, it's almost all shot in one location. They go out into the woods at one point, but a fantastic use of a really simple setting.
Very minimalist, very well executed, excellent acting, as we mentioned. So it's kind of a three-way operation. You've got the family who is functionally innocent, but flawed characters.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got this new couple that have arrived who have their positive qualities, but they're questioning the system, I guess is the best way to put it.
Absolutely, yes.
They have an alternate view to religion. They believe that heaven is, we are rewarded in heaven today, rather than being super strict, so you are rewarded later. Hence they indulge in things like drinking, and there seems to be it's implied that they've had engaged in an orgy or something like that, but we don't know if that's just the authority figures exaggerating or not.
Yes.
But nevertheless, they get up to a lot of scandalous mischief by the standards of the time. But then when the authority figures turn up, we think, a simple case of they'll round up the criminals, but it turns out that they're complete whack jobs as well. So you have, I don't want to say there's no good people, but most of them certainly have some very negative qualities.
But that's what great writing is.
Yes.
That's what makes it real, in the sense that it's not one or the other, but it's definitely shades.
Yes.
And that's what makes it interesting and human. Because if not, it's just a cliche, and you're like, whatever, this is what's going to occur. You should want to leave the cinema or the theatre, etc., going, oh my goodness, can you believe they did that? But what about this? And da-da-da-da-da. I mean, that's great writing.
It is, and that's part of the reason I said the horror is high impact, not because it's visceral, or partly, but because we know these characters so well, and it's so well written that when something happens to them, we go, ooh, even when it's one of the bad guys, you still go,
ooh, ugh.
Yeah, because you sort of, okay, I'm glad he's gone, but still, ugh.
Are we allowed to include some spoilers?
Shall we say mild spoilers?
Mild spoilers, okay. Well, what's interesting is who rides away at the end of this film.
Yes, well, I guess we can mention, I think it's important that we mention the fate of our titular character, because she is delivered.
Yes.
It feels like a prequel, so without saying exactly, but it feels like a prequel to her later story, which doesn't exist as far as we can tell.
No.
But what is she delivered from?
I think, partly a patriarchal system where her every movement and thought is determined by.
She's not allowed to read.
No. Well, she can't read.
Mm.
That's the thing, and that she has to follow everything that her husband says. And
Scripture's not for women, she says.
Oh, yes, that's right. And even her son kind of pushing her around and whatnot. She's not allowed to discipline him, etc. She is just in maternal mode. So I think she's kind of released, if you will, from those binds to the men in her life, and chooses to go out and live by herself.
Yes, I think that's particularly interesting. I mean, no characters are unscathed from this operation.
Everybody is emotionally, physically, mentally impacted for the worse.
Yeah.
By the end of this, no one is leaving going, "Oh, that was a nice, relaxing trip."
No. But I think you're right. There was a wonderful little piece of symbolism where, just for a little more plot context, we've got the young couple, and the young woman is saying to Fanny when they're just together, she's just planting little seeds. I think she says something like, "Oh, no, I'm not married. I do my own thing."
Yeah.
And then Fanny's
horrified.
The idea that you'd be with a man that you're not married to and make your own decisions is so, I mean, it shocks her to her core that this even could happen.
Yeah.
And that's planting the seed of these ideas. But there's a beautiful piece of symbolism when you have the young couple effectively taking over, and Fanny's husband, John, appropriately named for the role, he is basically, sort of semi-crippled. He's an older man, but he in a scuffle, his leg is hit. He's now limping heavily, and there's some narration from the young female character whose name eludes me, but she's narrating the story, and she talks about how later Fanny told me that this is when she felt the energy of John, her husband, leaving and moving on to, and it's happening as so John's told to go to the well to get water. And it's very difficult because he's so injured, but he does it just because he sort of has to. And then he stops, rests on the well, and then looks back and sees the scene before him. That's sort of symbolizing the past, you know. And he's stumbling out of the past, but he's got nowhere to go. And that ultimately leads to his, I guess we'll call it demise, more or less, at the end.
Well, he's left by himself.
Yeah.
Just like he's left in the past.
Yes. Yeah. So it all ties together. It's such good writing. It's so good. Before we move on to our final film, which I dare say you have one or two things to say about. Just a couple. How does Fanny Lie Delivered stack up as a feminist film?
Well, I mean, she's our protagonist. We're definitely dealing with women's issues. There's no doubt about that.
She starts with no agency.
Yes.
But that's the point.
Yes, absolutely. And she, by being liberated from her domestic situation, she all of a sudden goes and creates her own path, probably for the first time ever, which is super duper inspiring.
For 17th century, it's...
radical.
Yes,
You know, there's no doubt about that. However, she's manipulated all the way through by the men and also the young woman who comes and stays. She's almost tricked into certain things and whatnot. You can tell she's uncomfortable at times. So it is quite interesting to see her reactions and how she deals with all of that. Is it a feminist film? Absolutely. Do I think this is probably, if we have a scale of feminist film, this definitely is a huge step up in comparison with His Girl Friday. By the way, do you know what that means, that saying?
No, actually.
It means, well, I've got a gal and she's one hell of an assistant. I'll get His Girl Friday of it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Well, there's a bit of context that probably helps.
Crikey, I know.
Dear, oh dear. All right, we best move on. Now, there was a little film that was in the news. It grabbed a little bit of attention at the time, starring some Australian lady called Barbie.
No, called Margot Robbie.
Oh, is that it?
Playing Barbie.
Oh,
one of the many Barbies, which is just fantastic.
I don't even know where to start with this one. I've only seen the film once.
Okay.
Loved it.
Yep.
I didn't know what it was going in. I thought
Neither did I.
the concept is ridiculous. Why would you do it? And then it might have even been you who mentioned it, said you got to see this thing, or you're at least one of those voices. And I thought it was fantastic. I guess I take it as a feminist film with a lot of social commentary and satire, and it's all done very, very effectively. And over to you. What do you have to say about this film?
Loved it. Now, it's quite important to provide some kind of context with regards to who I am as a human being. I never had dolls growing up. I bought my first Barbie last year, okay, which is Margot Robbie as Barbie, okay, and the lovely Ryan Gosling as Ken.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I now own those, and fun fact, it turns out that Ken doesn't fit into Barbie's convertible.
Oh.
Which I love. I mean, the symbolism is everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know if it's intentional, but I like it.
I like it. I like it a lot. So I never had dolls as a kid. I remember being given a doll when I was 7 years old, and I burst into tears. And my parents were horrified, and they went, "Sweetheart, what do you want?" And I went, "I just want a panda." So I've never been a girly girl kind of thing.
Right. Did you get the panda?
Eventually, I did. Don't worry, I didn't break into any zoos or anything like that.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah. So I went in blind. Margot Robbie is a phenomenally clever woman. So I knew she doesn't put her name on just anything, that this would be good. I was blown away by the representation, the way that the story was told was really interesting. That's another thing with feminists, literature, film, etc., is the shape is not necessarily 100% linear. And whatnot. So I thought it was really interesting that we started at the dawn of time playing with dolls, and then Barbie rocks up right at the beginning is just brilliant. And a nice little nod to, obviously, Space Odyssey.
Which is one of my favourite films too, incidentally. So it's not linear, that's common, you're saying?
Well, absolutely. So it's quite normal for feminist work not to be linear. So it's backwards and forwards, etc., that kind of thing.
Why?
I don't know. I guess it's just a different way of telling stories. Maybe because women are constantly interrupted. Maybe that could be it.
Or I was going to give a much less interesting theoretical answer. I was going to suggest maybe it's just the idea of breaking with convention.
Absolutely. It could be that as well. I mean, it's interesting if we look at how women tell stories versus men. The latest Mad Max, I believe.
Furiosa, which was a prequel to the last film, yeah.
Or it might be the one before. I don't know. I'm not a huge Mad Max fiend. It turns out that George Miller got his wife to edit it.
Interesting.
And he went, "Look, every other film like this has been edited by a guy. You do it." And she won an Oscar.
Yeah, so that probably was the last one in Fury Road, but they've since done a prequel of Furiosa, which I thought was a little redundant because I thought, well, that Mad Max movie was basically Furiosa's movie anyway, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
But as a quick side note, I don't want to be diverted too much here, but I did see Furiosa. It was exceptionally well made. Didn't do particularly well, and the cynical part of me says, is it because it was a female lead? It didn't have the Mad Max name?
Now, that is a really good question. So we know that, I believe, Barbie in its first week worldwide made $1 billion, okay?
The first week?
Yeah, across the planet, the opening. It was absolutely huge. In fact, they created a new award somewhere in Hollywoodland for award season to kind of go, congratulations, like this is huge, profit-wise.
Wow.
Now, it's important to remind our listeners, it's not just because it is a famous brand franchise. It's because it is women telling women's stories, okay? It is giving the microphone to people who have been silenced for millennia. And it's flipped the tables big time with regards to, well, this is a matriarchal society. Look how safe everyone feels. Look at how everyone is so supportive of each other. Look at how everyone is excelling. And then we come to the real world, and there's that fantastic line where Margot and Ryan are, skating along, etc., in the 80s gear, and Barbie says, "I just feel really aware of myself, and not in a good way." And I just thought that's
Beautiful.
the first time it's ever been articulated so well.
Oh.
As a woman, we're told from around the age of 8 you have to keep yourself safe.
And
so seeing this kind of thing is just mind-blowing. The only other time I've really felt super duper safe is at a Taylor Swift concert, where 90% of people there are women, you know?
And would that line have been written by, if this were the old version, which would have been, let's cast these people, but the people in charge and writing it are predominantly men, would a line like that make it in there? Probably not.
And also, and I love the irony that the border Barbie is all men. Brilliant. Absolute genius. And they're completely incompetent and all the rest and are running around after life-size Barbies. It's just madness.
Yeah, there's so many layers that they just kept, what else can we throw in here? And it just kept going. And
absolutely. And it was just really, really fascinating to see how they've gone, okay, well, no, you think it's the daughter's Barbie, but it's actually mum, and that fantastic dance scene, you know, where the beautiful choreography, and then all of a sudden she stops and goes, does anybody ever think about dying? You're like, whoa, okay. And that everything, nothing was CGI. They made everything.
Really?
So those beautiful little montages, you know, in the boats and on the rockets and all the rest, they made that.
Wow.
Okay, so
it's good craft.
Oh, it's a phenomenal craft. And then if you get the chance online to go and see the lovely Ryan Gosling sing and do the macho kind of dance moves to I'm Just Ken with Greta Gerwig laughing hysterically in the background, it's worth it. Okay.
This is it's a gift that keeps giving, this film.
Look, it is simply wonderful. It has so many positive messages in it as well. And talking to young men who went and saw this film and went, okay, cards on the table, no lying, we don't do that to each other. Did you feel emasculated? And they went, no, I felt liberated.
Yeah.
I do whatever I, want as long as I'm being a decent human being.
Yeah, and that's the message that I got from the film. It wasn't anti-men. It was just anti a particular type of behaviour.
Oh, and we get to see that beautiful extreme when Ken comes back from the real world, and instigates the patriarchy and takes over Barbie's house.
Yeah, because of course that would happen, wouldn't
it? Well, history is interesting.
Yeah.
And, go from there, and how the women deal with things versus the men. The guys are out on the beach, going at it with one another with paddles and all the rest. And meanwhile, the women are like, awesome, we've set them up. Off we go. Another beautiful moment is where they're all sitting around the campfire, and they've all got different instruments. And Ken starts singing Push by Matchbox 20. And he's like, here's a little something I wrote. And it's just... beautiful. Greta Gerwig is a genius.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like you could spend as much time as we have so far today just on Barbie, but I guess if we were to wrap things up by zooming back out again here, we've got we started with 1940.
Yeah.
We had let's say one pretty good crack at it. Definitely some positives with His Girl Friday in the context of the time. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Doesn't hold up to today's standard.
No, definitely not. In my eyes, it doesn't, just because if she had walked away from both men at the end, I go, wow.
Yes.
Boom.
That's a powerful message.
That is a very powerful message. But the fact that I need you kind of thing, and we have to get married, we can't even just live together or work together, that kind of thing, really just makes me go, oh.
Yeah. So can we take something positive from this then? See the change?
I think so. I think, women in the workplace and being taken seriously for their expertise and whatnot. As well, this is going to sound a little bit odd, but remember, misogyny is a thing. Seeing men respect her and she's been liked and can have a joke with them and all the rest and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think His Girl Friday does take a good positive step is she's when she walks into the room, the blokes go, "Oh, well, she's here."
Absolutely.
So she owns the room when she walks in. That's
Yes.
pretty impressive for 1940.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And every scene, she's amazing, Ms. Russell. She owns it.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a wide range. There's some beautiful moments where she's interviewing a prisoner, and it's a whole other level. It slows down. It's probably one of the first times in the film where everybody can take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And go, and you can see her planting seeds along the way, and you go, brilliant.
And
Absolutely
then,
brilliant.
yeah, it's definitely one of my favourite films from the era. And Fanny Lai Delivered then takes us through a history through time in a way, because it starts off showing how things really were for women. I think the historical accuracy was there.
The oppression was phenomenal.
Yeah, and then it kind of jumps forward to a wave of feminism, which I don't think really was around at that point.
Not at all. Not
so
at all.
It kind of brings in this modern interpretation,
Absolutely.
and you get the sense that Fanny is isolated because of this view, which she would have been had she taken it. And then we go to Barbie, which is just, I don't even know how to summarize Barbie.
I think what's amazing about Barbie is representation. I mean, we have a black president.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've got Barbies who are disabled. Remember, Barbie can do anything. Barbie hasn't always looked like everyone, but now that is starting to happen. It's important to note, look, it's not perfect. All of those actors were beautiful, Kens and Barbies. There's no doubt about that. But remember, you got to see it to be it.
Yes.
And to have a disabled Barbie, to have Barbie with, brown hair, etc., doing this particular job and whatnot, and even the wonderful Barbie played by Kate McKinnon, Crazy Barbie, or whatever it is. We're like, we see you, girl.
Yes.
We all know a crazy Barbie.
I think that's a wonderful way to put it. The idea of representation being at the heart of this, and I think that's a wonderful summary of the film and probably of what's important about the whole discussion. So that might be a good place to wrap it up.
Hang on, are you silencing me? Is that what's happening here?
Well, I am closer to the stop button on the control.
Yeah,
but
fine. That's patriarchy at work, folks, all right? Control. You heard it here first.
Okay, would you like to press the stop button?
No, you can press it. But it's been lovely talking to you.
Likewise. Thank you, Kate. It's been a joy, and we definitely have to do this again.
Absolutely. Sign me up.
Excellent.